We define ourselves through our history, culture, and food, but we so rarely think to stop and ask, how does it all work? Revealed examines the hows and whys while pulling the curtain back on the things you never thought to ask. On this episode, we learn about the illicit history of speakeasies and take a look at the ones still around today.
I think to me what's so special about a speakeasy is the element of surprise, being a bit taboo.
It's basically like a secret clubhouse. You go through a secret door and all of a sudden you're in this fun place.
Speakeasies were a staple of life in the Roaring '20s, often back rooms hidden behind unassuming facades and an oasis of indulgence during prohibition-era America.
After the Civil War, the changes were going on, a new nation was being born, and this led to the establishment of the 19th Amendment, which established prohibition.
Ordinary citizens became rebels, and a burgeoning gangster industry would forever alter the nation's criminal landscape.
Exploded the gangster world into a huge industry, which then became a syndicate.
When something's prohibited, that makes it all the more better to be doing.
It's a spirit of secrecy that continues to thrive in the modern world.
People like to push boundaries, explore things that are either off the radar, or if you feel like you shouldn't be doing something, just kind of walk that fine line.
The word speakeasy has its own history. It comes from Irish workers in Pennsylvania who basically said, the bar mattress says, boys, speak easy, calm down. But people got a little toasty.
It was the Roaring '20s, a time of unprecedented social change, roaring jazz music, and hidden worlds beneath the surface of American society.
It was a very strong effort to contain the changes that were going on in this country. New fashion, new art, new literature. It was a large movement of very concerned, both secular but mostly Christians, moralists, who believed that alcohol was a sin and that they were destroying families.
In 1919, the Volstead Act was passed, prohibiting the manufacture and sale of alcohol. Breweries, distilleries, and bars across America were forced to close their doors.
You could not import, sell, or distribute alcohol. You could drink it, but the importation, distribution, and sale was illegal.
It's estimated to have cost the nation nearly $11 billion in tax revenue. And the reaction to prohibition was less than enthusiastic.
And in New York in particular, you have a problem because most people didn't support prohibition in New York. It was imposed upon them. They also believed that government had no right to tell them not to drink.
It wasn't just New York that felt their right to drink was taken away. Connecticut actually voted against prohibition before it was enforced in 1920. The governor of New Jersey even vowed to make New Jersey as wet as the Atlantic Ocean, in defiance of the Volstead Act, which dried up the state's alcohol production industry. Prohibition was meant to curb the consumption of alcohol, cut down on crime, and re-establish the old order of things, but it did the exact opposite. They earned the name bootleggers, a tip of the hat to Midwestern traders who stashed flasks and bottles in their bootlegs.
They came down from Canada through New Jersey into New York, and also came up the coast from the Caribbean into New York.
And some made a pretty penny in the process.
John Kennedy's father was a major player in the rum running trade, and that's where they got their money from. This was not just this secret little world. This was a business of significant size.
Speakeasy owners had to keep their locations under wraps or face getting caught. They found creative ways to make sure federal agents couldn't enter.
You just knock on the door and they would look at you and you would have either a card or you'd give a secret word.
The tradition of a password to enter a speakeasy has survived into modern day speakeasies.
So we're on Main Street, Farmingdale, the village of Farmingdale. It's kind of Main Street, USA, you know, a lot of great restaurants and bars and shops and things here. It's a kind of throwback block. So if you come here on a Friday or Saturday night, starting at 7 o'clock, there's a big guy standing here. You give him the password and he opens up the secret entrance for you.
Though it might look like just an ice cream parlor, beneath the surface, it's something else. When brothers John and Nick bought the place, they had no idea they'd open their business above a historic speakeasy.
The realtor that was showing us the space brought us down here through the back doors.
And we were like, I don't know if we want to go down there. It looked like a root cellar. Instead of finding like a low ceiling that you would normally find in a basement, we found a 12-foot ceiling, pieces of tin on the ceiling, tin on some of the walls, and the real estate guy didn't know anything about the history. It was only later when we opened the ice cream store that the mayor said, you know, how do you guys like it here? We said, oh, we like it a lot. He said, how do you like having a speakeasy in your basement? We said, oh, we like that too. What are you talking about? And he explained that there had been this guy named DeMarco who operated a department store upstairs and a speakeasy downstairs. They say upstairs he made a living and downstairs he made a fortune.
They did their best to preserve as much of the original building materials they found in the basement.
The ice cream store is named after my mom, but the speakeasy is named after my grandmother since she really was around in this time period. She was a flapper at that time. If you notice on these walls, this is some of the original tin wall covering from 100 years ago. We found this on a few of the walls downstairs. We used it to line the entranceway. We wanted it to be the first thing everybody sees when they first come in. We have a piece of that tin wall covering on every menu. So when you're sitting at the table and you're holding a menu, you're holding something from about 100 years ago.
People love the idea of coming through the ice cream store, going through the bookcase store, walking down the stairs. They hear the music playing, they see all the people here. It's just so exciting. It's just a great feeling watching the look on their face, the smile when they come down the stairs. They start filming, they start texting friends, and it's just so exciting. It's great.
If you know the secret password, you can go from eating ice cream upstairs to cocktails in a historic bar downstairs. A rare treat even today.
Look, everybody wants to be Rick from Casablanca, right? Like everybody's seen Casablanca and Humphrey Bogart is the coolest and he owns the coolest club and everybody wants to come there. We know we're not Humphrey Bogart, but we do get a little taste of enjoying that special kind of place that people really love coming to.
Everybody is to leave here immediately.
While there were raids at Casablanca, it's not a worry today. But that wasn't the case back in the 1920s when Prohibition was in full swing.
So this is how they used to get out if the police did show up. This door leads underneath the ice cream parlor, and then under the shoe repair guy next door, and then out his back door. The idea was the police come in one building, you leave out of a different building. It's kind of like if you had a tunnel into your next door neighbor's house.
Long Island was perfect for bootleggers because they could easily grab booze from international ships located a few miles offshore, just outside of the Coast Guard's reach. They would use small boats to smuggle it into harbors and inlets along the coast. Then the booze was transported incognito around the island and eventually into the city. The brothers believe Charlotte's was strategically picked as a midway point between both shores with no threat of the Coast Guard patrolling so far inland.
110 runs from South Shore to the North Shore, and depending on how the boats were coming in with the booze, they would either pick it up on the North Shore or the South Shore and drive up and down 110 delivering.
While the original Speakeasy's name is unknown, the brothers learned that the man who owned the space most likely had ties to organized crime.
They had a vehicle by which was prohibition to bring in and sell alcohol, which exploded the gangster world into a huge industry, which then became a syndicate.
All of the famous organized crime guys had a hand in what was going on here as well.
Any speakeasy had to have the backing of a gangster. You weren't going to open up a speakeasy. And if you did, there were repercussions for that, to say it mildly.
Johnny B. Baronis is the owner of The Back Room, a speakeasy with deep ties to the organized crime families that operated in New York. It is the only remaining speakeasy in Manhattan that was operating in the 1920s.
We are the last speakeasy in New York City to be continuously running. And that's what separates us from other speakeasies, places that have really cool fronts, but they don't have the history. You can't fake the history.
Coming up, we meet the gangsters that kept speakeasies running.
I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Odin the Killer Baden was his name, because he was notorious.
And the vibrant characters that kept customers coming back for more.
Texas Guinan. Her famous line was, "Hello, sucker." And she would say that to all her guests, and they would love it.
As the nation grappled with its evolving identity, the speakeasy became a symbol of resistance and resilience. But speakeasies were an illegal operation and needed a hefty supply of booze. Enter the likes of Al Capone, Meyer Lansky, Bugsy Siegel, Oni Madden, and Lucky Luciano, to name a few.
The biggest gangster in the city at the time was a man named Oni Madden. And he came out of the Irish gangs on the west side, the West 40s. He set up the clubs, the big expensive clubs, the Cotton Club, the El Fay Club, 21. I mean, you name it. He was the money and the power behind it.
In New Jersey, Abner Longy Zwillman ran a bootlegging ring out of Newark and was also linked to Murder Incorporated, a notorious group hired to take out anyone causing problems for the mafia crime families. Members of Murder Inc. were known to visit a certain speakeasy across the Hudson River, the Back Room. Originally called the Back of Ratner's, the speakeasy operated behind a 24-hour kosher deli of the same name, which remained in business until 2014. Back then, the speakeasy served as a meeting spot for high-ranking mafia members.
This is the neighborhood where the mafia started in this country. Prohibition was a great profit center.
There were over 1,000 mob-related deaths in New York City alone during Prohibition. By 1931, a commission of 20 families from across the country was founded by Luciano.
There was the Italian mafia and the Jewish mafia, and they both lived down here, like Meyer Lansky, Bugsy Siegel, Lucky Luciano, Dutch Schultz, all lived in this area. This particular speakeasy was backed by Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel.
When you visit the Back Room today, you have to walk through the same alley that speakeasy customers would have used in the 20s.
You open up a door and right away you're put into a certain atmosphere and the theme, and it brings you back to the 20s, I think. There were a lot of places to exit the back room. A gangster could have a meeting back here and have 6 or 7 different ways to get out. And when we talk about Meyer Lansky, there's a gangster that lived to be 81 years old. Gangsters don't live to be 81 years old. So he was very shrewd, and the reason why he'd have his meetings here is because there were a lot of ways out. It wasn't really about running from the feds, it was about running from a hit from other gangsters.
While the raids did happen, it wasn't uncommon to see police officials and city politicians mingling in speakeasies.
So you go to a bar, like this bar, and the alcohol was kept basically off premise or hidden away. And so their goal was always, the police was going in to find the alcohol because that made it illegal, because we're serving illegal drinks and stuff.
The back room features grand chandeliers, dark moody lighting, and plenty of loungy furniture for customers to relax into.
We tried to be historically correct. We serve our drinks in teacups, coffee cups, because that's how they did in the 20s. And they did that to throw off the feds. So when you were coming in to a place, especially this being a restaurant, people were drinking coffee, quote unquote.
The space may not be totally accurate to how the speakeasy looked back then, but Johnny B said he wanted to give customers a more glamorous experience to enjoy.
They were holding the walls because they knew the feds were going to eventually come in and smash it up. So what I did here is a speakeasy, but also the 1920 ballroom. So it's sort of a fusion between the speakeasy history and the art and the decor of the 1920s. That might have been in the ballrooms, probably not in the speakeasies.
So the city was alive, and in one estimate, I think it's 1925, the estimate is there's 100,000 speakeasies in New York.
These bars attracted a varied crowd, from famous writers like F. Scott Fitzgerald to local politicians and the everyday working man.
So you had a lot of Italians and African American neighborhoods in which people had their own hangouts. And of course, everybody knew each other in those places. It was very, and to get in, you have to know somebody. There was the Midtown, which was the center of the speakeasy scene in New York. And then there was Harlem, which was a whole nother scene, where you would actually have people of different races mixing. This is the 1920s, where race mixing in a formal sense didn't happen.
Speakeasies range from hole-in-the-wall dives to glitzy lounges and clubs. Owners would go to great lengths to compete for customers by hiring flappers, live bands, and famous performers.
Texas Guinan. She was actually from Texas, and she was a cowgirl. What's interesting about her is that she came to New York, and she had been in lots of the first movies that were made, the first 1 and 2 reel black and white movies. She was the first cowgirl. Her famous line was, "Hello, sucker." And she would say that to all her guests. and they would love it because they were the big spenders. You know, these were like rich people, the politicians, the actors of the day. They would come there and she would entertain them.
Let us drink to a further liberation of the American people. Happy days are here again.
By the 1930s, the majority of America rallied around politicians like Franklin D. Roosevelt, who ran his presidential campaign on ending prohibition. In 1932, Roosevelt delivered on that campaign promise and repealed the Volstead Act. The notable experiment was chalked up as a failure.
Most people, they didn't really look at it as a vice, and the police as well. You know, people got a slap on the wrist or whatever for breaking the law, but it's our understanding that the cops around here did not go after it so hard at the time. And 13 years, it seems crazy when you think about it now, that for 13 years alcohol was illegal, and then it went back to what it always was.
The 20s are remembered as a time of opulent parties. Today's flappers, gangsters, and bootleggers are immortalized in movies and TV as the people who kept nightlife alive.
Everybody has a sort of glamorized image of the bootleggers. You can't imagine how many people have come here and told me, my grandfather had a still, and my grandfather was a bootlegger, and my grandfather ran rum from here to there. So people are sort of proud of this history now. It's not like they were thieves or muggers or something like that. They were breaking the law, but it's a law that didn't really last.
Coming up, we learn about the resurgence of modern speakeasies.
It's basically like a secret clubhouse almost. You come through a laundromat that's a real working laundromat. You go through a secret door, and all of a sudden you're in this fun place with, you know, all these flashing lights and sounds. You know, more fun is what we're about here.
Prohibition was gone for good, but speakeasies still remain as a nostalgic escape into a bygone era. Some are old speakeasies that have been restored, while others are modern takes with a shtick.
It's basically like a secret clubhouse almost. You come through a laundromat that's a real working laundromat. You go through a secret door, and all of a sudden you're in this fun place with, you know, all these flashing lights and sounds and people having fun and drinking. And I would say the speakeasy element adds a lot of fun, and, you know, more fun is what we're about here.
When you walk into a laundromat, such the shock value coming in here and seeing all this.
Peter Rose is the owner of Sunshine Laundromat and the speakeasy in Brooklyn, sneakily tucked away behind an unsuspecting door, a stack of dryers.
The entire space was previously a laundromat, and we cut it in half, turned the back portion into a bar, and the front half remained a laundromat, just a little more condensed.
Running a speakeasy today is totally different from how it would have been in the 1920s. There's no real need for secrecy, but these spaces still face some quirky challenges.
We've had some interesting episodes here. For example, we received a letter from the liquor authority saying, sorry it didn't work out, but we came for an inspection and it's a laundromat, there's no bar there. Slightly amusing, but we're like, no, do not rescind our license, we need that. Similar experience with the health department, but then they finally found us. It's amazing how many people will come through, and we've seen it endless times, but to them, the sheer excitement of walking through a dryer door to enter a venue is just so special.
It is pretty secretive. One of the benefits of that is, by word of mouth, it's sort of only really cool people who find their way into Sunshine, or really curious people, and those are the kind of people who like pinball and having fun.
Peter's love of pinball led him to create a space that allows people to turn an otherwise boring chore into an enjoyable experience.
I think we had enough of a following with all the pinball machines that were previously in the laundromat, coupled with the mindset of it's difficult to appease everyone, but we tried to do the best for the masses, and it seems to have worked.
Even decades after the repeal of Prohibition, speakeasies still pique our curiosity and indulge us in a semi-secretive space.
I think to me what's so special about a speakeasy is the element of surprise and being a bit taboo. People tend to like to push boundaries and explore things that maybe are either off the radar, or if you feel like you shouldn't be doing something, just kind of walk that fine line.
They give communities a unique place to gather and mingle.
People in their 20s dancing with people in their 60s and 70s. Like everybody sort of comes together and enjoys the place together, where so many bars are either this is a young person's bar, this is an old guy's bar. But here we get a mix of everybody and people coming for all different reasons.
And they preserve a little bit of history.
I think every era in New York should be saved. There's a little bit of every era.
It was used as a speakeasy 100 years ago, and it's a speakeasy again.
People just love it, yeah.